All right, so it's that time of the week again for our new feature on Wednesdays where we focus on the more unconventional side of the law, and we're calling it So Now What? And we're joined once again by our expert lawyer and friend in all things legal, Director at Legalese.co.za, Eitan Stern.
He's in the house. Now, over the past 2 weeks, headlines have been dominated by the Babes Wodumo and Mampincha story after a video alleging abuse surfaced online. So this morning, we're focusing our attention on the legal process involved in abuse accusations. Eitan, welcome to the show.
Good to be here again.
I really love this segment. I really do, because we touch on things that most people are going through, I'm so sorry, on a daily basis. Don't report me or anything. But it's good that you're here.
Yeah, and of course I think this is all about empowering people out
there.
there. We want to know how the law works and how to count on it, lean on it as the public. So let's talk about the first question about the correct way of going about reporting abuse.
Okay, cool. So the first thing to say is there isn't really a correct or an incorrect way. I think we have to move away from that kind of rhetoric.
Good.
The correct way, that we shouldn't be judging victims of abuse. The best thing for them to do is to report it, but if they are seeking help in any way, in my opinion, that's the right way. But if they're going to report it in the legal setting, crimes like domestic abuse, violence, rape, child abuse, these are all crimes according to South African law. And if you want to report them, what you need to do is go down to the local police station and report them. Police stations are meant to have a safe area for people to report domestic abuse cases. So they're meant to be treated differently to other crimes that you would be reporting there. And if someone comes with a domestic abuse case, the police are supposed to, they don't always in every instance, but they are supposed to provide shelter and safety for that person.
I know that you just said now there is no correct way, but could we then say that there's an incorrect way of going about it as well?
Yeah, I suppose, well, the incorrect way, in my opinion, would be not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So definitely letting the state know what is happening so that something can be done about it would be the right thing to do, and the incorrect thing to do, in my opinion, would be doing nothing. So, and of course, that's not to be judgmental for abuse victims because we don't know what they're going through. I certainly don't know what they're going through, but there should be, that would be fantastic. That something can only be done about it if they're reporting it to a local non-profit organization that deals with abuse or to the police.
Yeah. Wow. So in a situation like this, where you've reported but you feel that your safety is at risk, is something like a restraining order possible, and how do you go about acquiring a restraining order?
Okay, so in South Africa, we don't refer to them as restraining orders. We call them protection orders. And there's two types of protection orders you can get. The first is under the Harassment Act. So if you're being harassed by, it doesn't need to be domestic abuse, but by any person who's harassing you, you can get a protection order. And the second is under the Domestic Abuse Act. So if you are experiencing abuse at home, then you can get a protection order under the Domestic Abuse Act. And what you would do is you would go to the police or lay a charge, and you would go to court, and then you need to go through a process to get this protection order. And the court first issues an interim order to make sure that you're safe. And if they have evidence that you're being abused and there's signs that it would happen again, you can get an interim order, and that at least is going to set some groundwork for the person to not be able to contact you and for the police to step in if they do. And then there's a court case that will happen, a trial of sorts, where your parties will bring evidence, and then a final protection order will be issued. With these protection orders, there's a warrant of arrest issued. So if the person who's being accused breaches that order and does confront the complainant, then the police can step in. So the court actually gives this victim the protection of the courts and of the police.
Yeah. I've had a friend that recently went through the whole trying to get a protection order. It is a long and arduous process, especially if the person who they're trying to get the protection order from doesn't show up.
For sure.
On the day.
Yeah.
So it really is.
For sure. I mean, there's certain requirements. It is, it is quite a serious order which is being issued, because the court is telling a person, look, you may not do certain things. So there needs to be what we call prima facie evidence. That is like kind of first basis evidence that something has happened, that there's been abuse, and there needs to be evidence that if nothing is done, there's a chance that there'll be further harm to this complainant. If those two things are present, then the courts hopefully will issue the order. But again, I mean, I've worked in the courts as well, and any given day, there are lines of people waiting outside the courts trying to get orders for domestic abuse. We have a real problem in this country that needs to be dealt with.
And I'm glad you said that, because it is a real problem. We need
Yeah.
to find a way in which the system better serves those that are suffering from abuse and almost handles it with a certain kind of urgency and immediacy that's warranted. Okay, we're going to ask you to stay, Eitan, because we're going to continue this conversation on our new feature, So Now What?
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
It's a Wednesday morning. We're live, large, and in charge on your Feel Good Breakfast show, and it's so good to have you with us. So now what? That's our new Wednesday feature where we investigate and examine the more unconventional side of the law. This time around, we are focusing on the alleged abuse, and of course, a story that made headlines last week between Babes Wodumo and Mampintsha. Eitan Stern, our friend in the law, and of course, director at Legalese.co.za, is with us.
Focusing on that story, Eitan, I want to ask, what are the laws around posting videos and pictures of the alleged abuse on social media platforms like Instagram or Facebook?
Okay, so here it gets quite complex. And essentially, one of the issues with our law today is there isn't enough law around social media. It hasn't been developed enough. And this isn't just a problem with South Africa. This is a challenge that every legal system is having. Social media didn't exist 10 years ago, and laws do have to now start to develop to deal with these sorts of things. That being said, you know, there isn't specifically laws around posting things on Facebook. You're allowed to post videos, but if you're saying something, if you post something which is either defamatory of a person or an invasion of someone's privacy, then there would be common law repercussions against that sort of thing. So you're allowed to post videos, but if you are saying things which are defamatory or you're invading someone's privacy by posting a video, then there can be repercussions.
Yeah. Now, one of the major issues with regards to Babes Wodumo is that she also accused her estranged partner of logging into her Instagram account and making posts on her behalf. So is there a law against that, or was the onus on her to keep her passwords and her access to her social media accounts a secret to herself?
So again, this is the sort of thing where our law hasn't developed enough, so we need to still revert back to the common law. And what we're really looking at when dealing with this new technology of social media is laws that are hundreds or even thousands of hundreds of years old. Yeah. So essentially, if someone logs into your Facebook account, then yes, there could be an invasion of your privacy by them doing that. But there isn't any specific law that says you may not log into someone else's social media accounts. Of course, it is a really, really crucial thing for you to keep your passwords safe, not just because of the harm that can happen, but insurance companies, if you're insured, they might require you to have kept your passwords safe. So definitely people should be keeping their passwords safe. And it could be an invasion of privacy, but it's a bit more of a complex question, that one.
I found it quite interesting because what happened afterwards was Mampintsha then accused her, laid a charge of abuse against her as well. Is that in the hopes that the two will then cancel each other out? Or can both be found guilty at the same time and then it cancels each other out? Like, what happens in that situation?
So this is a really interesting question. So there's a difference between civil crimes and criminal crimes. A civil wrong is where one person does something wrong to another. So if I owe you money and you owe me money, that can cancel each other out. With crimes, with criminal crimes, it's not the same. When you murder, steal, rape someone, these are not necessarily just harms that you're doing to another person, but these are harms that you're doing to the state as a whole. So essentially, it's taken out of the hands of the person, and the state has the choice whether to prosecute you or not. So if the two people abuse each other, essentially the state makes a choice whether to charge them both, and then the people that have been abused will just be witnesses in that trial. And so it's not that they cancel each other out, they can both be charged for different crimes and they can both be found guilty.
Final question, are abuse laws gender specific, or is it the same both ways?
Okay, also an interesting one. So no, they're not gender specific, and this is something which we need to be talking about more, is that men can be raped, men can be abused, men can be the victims and these sorts of things. So, you know, in our constitution enshrines equality, so crimes, you know, domestic abuse crimes can be against men or women. But of course, you know, when looking at restraining orders, they look at, is the person in danger? And then of course, you know, that the gender of the person can have an effect in whether there's a restraining order given. But in general, no, these things are across the board for all genders.
Sure.
Interesting stuff.
Very,
Yeah.
very interesting.
Important to be talking
Well,
about. It's great that we're talking about it on the show.
I'm so
Thanks,
happy
Eitan.
that we need to just continue this conversation. And if you have an interesting legal conundrum that has you asking, so now what? Make sure you share that with us on our different platforms, and maybe we'll be able to cover it in future segments as well. Like we said, we're so happy that we're opening up this conversation, and it's something that needs to happen constantly.
Yeah.